the utilization of physician assistants. He is in the process of completing his PhD in Leadership and Policy at Niagara University with a research focus on global health and best leadership practices for working in developing nations. We appreciate John being here today. John, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you to everybody out there who's taken time out of your busy day to join us today. I want to just kind of review a little bit of our agenda for the day here. And basically, we're going to be trying to learn a little bit about our participants that are out there. I know it's a little bit of a different format where I don't get to see you face-to-face, but we want to try and find out a little bit about you and maybe why you're signed on to this webinar. I thought that it would be useful as we got into this topic for me to maybe take you a little bit on my personal journey that I've been on to get more involved in global health and poverty alleviation work. So I'm going to tell you some stories and show you some pictures of some of the work that I've done down in Haiti. And that'll kind of transition us into some of what I call my aha moments, where basically I've had some kind of personal revelations that have led me on this journey to try and do a good job of working in the realm of global health and poverty alleviation. Then we'll move on into looking at a brief overview of some literature about what other researchers have to say on the topic, and then on to some best practice recommendations and concluding thoughts and discussion. Now, I've left some time at the end for discussion, but if you have some comments or questions that are burning, feel free to shoot those in your chat box, and Cindy will keep me alert to anything that we should jump into the presentation and discuss at that time. So let's go ahead and move on to ask you a couple polling questions here. And basically, I've got 4 questions. I think they should show up for you on the right side. First question was, I'm just wondering whether any of you have ever traveled to a developing nation. So you can just click yes or no there. Developing nation would be someplace other than maybe most of Europe, Canada, the United States, that has an economy that's not quite as developed as we have here in the United States, very agricultural in nature perhaps. And then second question, does your job ever involve working in developing nations? And some of you I know get to do some traveling for work, so seeing if it ever takes you not just to the more developed countries, but developing nations. Third question would be, have you ever done any volunteer humanitarian work in a developing nation? So maybe you volunteered to go on a missions trip through your church or some other organization that took you to places like Haiti or other similar countries. And then the fourth one would be, let me advance my slides for you here. Fourth one would be, would you like to volunteer for a short-term humanitarian mission in a developing nation someday? And maybe that's part of why you're joining us today, is to learn a little bit more about what that would all be like. And I do take RIT alumni and others with me to Haiti at least once a year, so perhaps we can connect at that point. So I'm just kind of looking over the answers now. It looks like a decent number of people have traveled to a developing nation, not so much for work, maybe a little bit more on the volunteer side, and a good number of you would be interested in doing that. So excellent. So I'm glad that you're with us today, and we can explore that a little bit further. All right, so let me just give you a little background in my introduction to global health, and any of you out there who have maybe heard me speak about this in other settings or taken a class from me may have heard some of these portions of the presentation today before. But it's kind of strange, given how involved I am right now in global health and international things. It really wasn't part of something that I had planned to do for a good chunk of my life. I did see, though, lots of people around me, family and friends, got very involved in this sort of work, and you can see on the slide the list of countries that a lot of my close connections were going to on a regular basis. And on that last bullet point, it says, I was content to be a sender, not a goer. And basically what I'm referring to is I would be the guy who got letters from my various friends and family saying, I've signed up to go on a trip, I'm doing some fundraising, and I would appreciate your support if you could help me raise the money I need to go on this trip. So I would occasionally, write a small check and participate that way, but I wasn't really the one going on the trip too much. But eventually, I noticed that I started to change because inevitably I would hear the amazing stories that these people were telling when they came back from their trip. They always focused on the kids that they met, how amazing the kids were, and all the different special relationships that they had developed. And as social media became more of a thing, they were staying in touch with each other on Facebook, and it was really obvious that these trips had completely transformed the lives of the travelers that had gone on them. And I guess maybe I was kind of feeling like stuck in a rut, or life needed to be spiced up a little bit, and I was ready for some new life experiences. So I ended up deciding to go to Haiti. That seemed to be the country that the majority of my close friends and family were going to, so I had more opportunities in that direction. So I started training well in advance of my first trip back in the winter of 2011. We were put through a great training program by our leader that involved learning about the culture, learning some language, learning about the different challenges we would face. We did team building and prepared for what our team was going to do while we were there. And then actually set out on the journey in April of 2012. The funny thing is, prior to committing to go to Haiti, if you'd showed me the map of the Caribbean, I might have struggled a little bit to point out exactly which part of it was Haiti, but hopefully you can see the arrow on the left side of your screen is pointing to the island of Hispaniola, and on the right side of that island is Dominican Republic, and on the left side is Haiti. And we flew into Port-au-Prince, which is visible on the map on the right side, which is the capital city, and then took a trip through the mountains on this wildly exciting, windy road through the mountains down to Jacmel on the southern coast. Now, I know many of you know a bit about Haiti, but just a quick review. I know my wife is a fifth grade teacher out in Bloomfield, New York, and they study the Western Hemisphere, and they learn about how Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And there's all kinds of circumstances that contribute to that. They have had trouble with their government being effective. They don't have free public education, so you can imagine if a vast majority of your population is not educated and not developing critical thinking skills and all the things that people need to be truly effective in their government and just in their civilization in general, things can really struggle. So things were bad, but they got worse in January of 2010 when there was a very large 7.0 earthquake that struck just outside the capital city of Port-au-Prince, and you can see the death toll that's listed there. For those of you who are from the Rochester area, you might recognize that that would be basically all of the population of the city of Rochester plus more that died, depending on which estimate is the most accurate. And 250,000 homes destroyed or severely damaged, and all those commercial businesses destroyed. It was just devastating. There was lots and lots of awful pictures I could have put on here, but I chose not to go too gory with the aftermath of that awful earthquake. The organization that I traveled with is one called Restore Haiti, and it's a wonderful organization. If you want to learn more about them, you can go to www.restorehaiti.com. But you can see the mission of Restore Haiti is one to empower communities to rise from a culture of desperation to one of restored hope and self-sustainability, which is a very RIT concept when you talk about sustainability, and it really resonates with me. We'll really dive into that a little bit more as I go along here. Basically, the way the organization works is they have people sponsor kids, real live people who you can go visit and get to know, and they make sure that those children have access to good nutrition. They make sure they get at least one really good nutritious meal every day, which for many families is a very difficult thing to make happen. They also make sure each of the kids are going to school. Again, knowing that there's no free public education, that's a huge benefit. they make sure they have access to health care, and then try and address their general living conditions. Some people had very, very inadequate housing, so they've been involved in building houses as well. So let me tell you a little bit about my first trip. Anybody who's heard me talk about Haiti has heard me talk about my buddy Colson. This young man, who I'm pictured here on the top slide with attending to his knee. Oh, I wanted to tell you one other thing. Let me go back here. The picture there of that gentleman, he's wearing an RIT t-shirt. This is Mr. Lafleur, and he is an amazingly inspirational Haitian man that grew up in the poorest of poor parts of Haiti and had every reason to just be a victim who never amounted to anything. But he really rose above all of his circumstances and has done amazing things. He was basically the guy who got things started in Haiti, and he eventually partnered with an American gentleman named Philip Peters, who was based out of the Nashville area, specifically Franklin, Tennessee. And Philip started Restore Haiti as an American organization that partnered with Mr. Lafleur down in Haiti. So that's kind of the origin. And Jean-Gerald Lafleur has come and spoken at RIT twice, and hopefully look forward to welcoming him back in the future. That's him wearing his RIT shirt with pride down in Haiti. All right, so back to my buddy Colson here. On my very first day, someone told me there was a young man who had skinned his knee and wondered if I could take care of him. So I cleaned up his knee and put on a bandage, and I remembered that our team leader had instructed us to each try and learn some Haitian Creole words every day. And in the evening, when our team got together, we would talk about what we had learned. So I said to this young guy who did know quite a bit of English, Colson, can you teach me some Creole? And he would do that, and we developed this daily routine where I would clean his knee, put a new dressing on it, he'd teach me some new words, and then I would give him a Cliff Bar, and we kind of bonded over that throughout the week. And he was a great guy, and just fell in love with him. Wonderful young man. And throughout that week, I worked in the medical clinic, and it was, I have to admit, a bit overwhelming. I just kept seeing things that I'd never seen before. I was constantly confronted with what I didn't have that I was used to having. It mentions their swollen parotid glands. I saw the steady stream of young children with swollen parotid glands, and I was thinking to myself, I've seen a few adults over the years with one swollen parotid gland. The parotid gland is kind of in your cheek and jaw area. It's one of the salivary glands. And my experience with it was a duct might get plugged up occasionally and one side would swell up. You have them on both sides, but I'd never seen a bunch of people with bilateral parotid gland swelling, and I was very confused. And that evening, after the first day of seeing that, I did a little internet search, and I looked up, causes of swollen parotid glands, and I was thinking, oh man, I should have known that. That's a sign of mumps. But in the United States, I'd never actually seen a patient with mumps before, because we all have the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, so our kids just don't get mumps. But they didn't have their vaccinations there, so a lot of the kids had mumps. I also saw a whole bunch of people that had abdominal problems, and many of them had painful swollen livers. On the lower picture, I'm examining one of the kids that had painful swollen liver, and I'm thinking, boy, if I was back in Rochester working in the emergency room that I used to work at, I would be getting blood tests, I'd be checking liver functions, I'd be, some sort of imaging, ultrasound, CT scan, trying to figure out what was going on, but I didn't have any of that available. And so while my week was amazing and I made so many interesting connections, I had this level of frustration that I just couldn't do what I wanted to do, and that these kids had real problems that I wanted to evaluate and help, but I didn't know how to do it because I didn't have the resources. I will say during that week, I never felt more alive in my life than I did, and I remember thinking, why did I wait so long to come on a trip like this? The people were amazing. I expected to go down there and be, helping these poor, pathetic people, and they were so positive and inspirational and loving and kind, and they boosted my spirits, I think, more than I probably boosted theirs. On the last day, our team was gathered, and the Haitians are very good at making very dramatic speeches. They're very passionate. And they were, the adults were saying goodbye to us and thanking our team for all the great stuff that we had done. And this little boy, Colson, steps forward and says he would like to say something, which I thought was very brave. And he completely caught me by surprise when he said, "I just want to say how much I love Dr. John," and he mentioned another lady on the trip who had helped him out as well, Sarah, and I just am so grateful for how you took care of me, and now I've decided I want to be a doctor. They don't know what a physician assistant is in Haiti, so if you take care of patients, you're a doctor. So I want to be just like Dr. John. He started calling me and be a doctor someday, and I made him this little bird and tree ceramic set, and I was just blown away. I was kind of all choked up. I didn't expect anything like that to happen. And I was pretty moved by that experience. And I hadn't been able to speak to my wife the whole time we were down there because of the cell phone coverage was different. And we flew into Newark, New Jersey, and I made my first call home. And I said, or my wife said, "So how was your trip?" And my mind was just flooded with, I didn't even know how to explain it. There was so many amazing sights and sounds and people, and I said, I don't know, it was great, it was hard, it was, you know, confusing, wonderful. But I met this boy Colson, and I started to try and tell her about him, and all of a sudden I couldn't speak. I was all choked up again, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm turning into an emotional basket case trying to process this trip, and I think I did a little like, sorry, I think we've got a bad connection here. Be right with you in a minute. And eventually, you know, got so I could talk about it without getting choked up again. And I realized, you know, all right, I've been through something powerful. This is going to change me in a good way, I think. So I went back to Haiti again about a year later, and I'm looking forward to seeing Colson. And the first thing he says when I see him is, "Oh, Dr. John, my life has been so empty without you in it." I'm like, oh, he got me again. The third trip I go back, I'm looking forward to seeing Colson again, and we often go for a walk around the city of Jacmel on our first full day there, and we're out walking around, and he said, "You know, Dr. John, I only live with my mom. I never really had a dad before." I said, "Yeah, that must be really hard." And he's like, "Yeah, my mom's really nice, but it's hard not having a dad." So I said, "Yeah, I can imagine that would be very difficult." He's like, "So I was wondering if you could be my dad now." I'm like, oh, you got me again. You know, every time the emotion of this guy is so intense. And there's many different stories like that. I just wanted to share a couple of them to give you a sense for how this has impacted me. But as I got more involved with the organization, I eventually was asked to be the director of medical and dental operations. They initially started focused on nutrition and education, and then medical was kind of coming on board, so I was asked to help develop that. And then last year I got asked to be on the board of directors, and now had a chance to go to Haiti 5 times. That led me to be asked to go to Liberia as well to do some consulting work over there, and actually got licensed as a PA in Liberia. Ended up in a couple parades, got made the honorary chief of the village of Yangaya. Like I'm telling you, if you open yourself up to this kind of stuff, all kinds of crazy things, wonderful things can happen. Kind of bringing it back to the RIT connection, I've had a great time. One of my all-time favorite trips was when I was able to bring 6 RIT students with me, and I've also brought 8 RIT alumni with me to Haiti, and we're looking at ways of expanding that for the future. Here's a picture of the 6 students that I brought with me. The 5 to the right side of the picture were all from the physician assistant program, and the one on the left was in computer science at the time. And again, a great experience working with them. I really loved it. In 2015, I was able to bring 7 RIT alumni with me, and they're scattered throughout that picture. I also did want to point out the gentleman in the top left of the picture is Dr. Mark Shelley, who's the Chief of Infectious Disease at Highland Hospital, and also the Medical Director for Passport Health, our local travel health organization. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what he did with me down there. And then just off my left shoulder, or to the right of me in the picture, is Dr. Shraddha Pradavati, who is a OBGYN doctor from Highland Hospital here in Rochester that came down and helped us do an amazing women's health training program while we were there. And lots of great alumni in that picture. And then this last August, I was able to take 2 more of our wonderful female alumni with me, Terry Reagan on the left side of the picture and Sam Whalen on the right side of the picture, and we'll see more about what they did in a few minutes here. So you've heard a little bit about the experiences that I've had, and again, just a very small sample. But as I was kind of processing what I had experienced, I had what I'm calling my aha moments. Again, I mentioned I expected to be helping people that were so sad and pathetic and desperate and all of that, and what I found was nothing like that at all. I found amazing people that were just beautiful. I mean, if you look at the pictures of these kids, they're just gorgeous, so resilient. You know, they've been through a lot of tough stuff, but they never complain. They never act like they're victims or anything. They're joyful. They're loving. Some of them have said to me, you know, when I ask, like, what would you like me to tell people back in the United States about you? They say, tell people that we're proud to be Haitians, that we love our culture, that we're doing fine. You know, they don't need to feel sorry for us, and I thought that just was really, you know, powerful to have that transition in the way I was thinking about things. I love this picture of these young kids. They're like little rock stars, and you know, a couple other revelations that hit me was, like, I never got to decide where I was born. You know, I didn't get to choose that I was born in New York State in the United States of America, and they didn't get to choose that they were born in Haiti. And, you know, sometimes we get all worried about taking care of only people in the United States, or, you know, that's their problem, not our problem. But really, we're all kind of part of the same human family, and, you know, it's a little presumptuous, I think, to sort of say, like, who deserves what based on where they live, because none of us really had much of a say on where we were born into this world. As I got to know people down there, it really became apparent to me that, you know, they have the exact same hopes and dreams and desires for their families to grow up. They want their kids to be healthy. They want them to be able to go to school and maybe go on to college and have a good career and have their own families and all of that. But they don't have the safety nets. They don't have the resources that help make that possible. You know, if you're spending so much of your life just trying to survive, trying to find food and water and shelter, you're not really able to get more into the side of self-actualization and you know, really reaching your full potential. So I made a list of some of the things that they don't have that we have. Some people say, again, why are you worried about poor in Haiti? We have poor people here in the United States, but I would put forth that the poor in the United States would be considered very privileged compared to the poor in Haiti. You know, anybody in the United States can go to a hospital regardless of their ability to pay and receive medical care. In Haiti, they don't have health insurance, they don't have Medicaid. You basically have to pay in advance before you receive care. It reminds me of when I take my dog to the vet. I've had a few times where they've said, you know, your dog needs surgery and it's going to be $1,500 and we're not going to do it unless you pay us up front. That's pretty much how it is for patients down there. Our people who are hungry can go to a food cupboard. If they're homeless, they can go to a homeless shelter. There's food stamps and different forms of public assistance. Everyone's guaranteed a free public education. I went through high school in a public school, and I feel like I got a great education, and you know, that's something that they can't take for granted. If they don't have money, they don't go to school, and very few people have extra money to do that. There's certainly the retired people don't collect their Social Security and all of those kinds of things that our people in the United States are used to. So continuing with sort of sorting out how to think about this from my perspective, I realized because I'm now aware of the situation, I no longer have an excuse. I no longer can, you know, claim ignorance about the situation. And because, as I've expressed, I've developed a deep relationship with, you heard about Colson, and I could tell you about Ali and Wendell and Wishnell and all these other guys that are real people to me that are people I care about, and I really want to see them succeed in their life. So I have kind of this mission to figure out how do I make sure they have access to what they need to reach their potential, because their potential is immense. And I don't think that, you know, our American kids deserve those things more than those kids do. Again, just luck of the draw and where we were born. So I identified, a different way of thinking about the people there and about, the issues were made real to me, but I needed to figure out, now what do I do about that? And this is kind of move us into, where do we go from here? So on my personal journey, I just dove heavily into reading books about global health and poverty alleviation, and I talked to many experts. Once you kind of get into this area, you'll find other like-minded people that you can learn from. One of my mentors here at RIT, Dr. Jim Myers, has been to Haiti many times, and he's been a great resource for me and the leadership of other organizations that do this kind of work. I also, in reading and talking to people, learned that there's a whole lot of Americans, Canadians, Europeans that have great intentions, but they end up actually causing harm by doing what they think is good, and that may not seem to be obvious how that would be. If you're going down there trying to help those people, like, how are you doing harm? But you actually can create dependence. It's kind of like the old saying, it's better to teach someone to fish than give them a fish, or some variation on that theme. If you're just going down and giving people handouts, but not actually teaching them or enabling them or empowering them to be able to be self-sufficient, it doesn't really create anything sustainable. Again, that big RIT word, sustainability. So we need to teach people to be fishermen or fisherwomen and not just, here's a fish. Sometimes people from the U.S. or other places will bring a whole bunch of something into the country thinking that they're helping, but they might not think about there's people in that country who make a living by selling that product. And if you flood the market with a bunch of, clothes or medications or different things that they actually do have there, you may end up putting somebody out of business who's trying to, eke out a living by having their own little business. Sometimes, like I heard after the earthquake, that the U.S. shipped down tons of rice, trying to be helpful, great intentions, but the people in Haiti actually had a decent supply of rice already, and the people who made a living by selling rice now no longer could sell their rice, and they were kind of pushed more into poverty by our attempt at doing something good. People often will just kind of come in with their American way of thinking and not really pay attention to local culture and traditions, and some of the ways that can be problematic is in the way we dress. It might not be appropriate. Women wearing shorty shorts is probably not going to be something that's well received, I've learned down there, and I actually have done quite a bit of research on my last trip about what should medical people wear when they're seeing patients down there. Because a lot of us were wearing shorts just because it was so hot. We weren't used to the heat. And I learned that was a very bad decision. They don't, think that medical people should wear shorts. Of course, I wouldn't wear shorts to the hospital I work at in the United States, but, we think, it's just Haiti, you can do whatever, and that's really not true. And lots of examples like that. A lot of times there's very little input from the local people about what they need, what they think should be done, involving them in the solution. And, I've heard Dr. Myers talk about people going down and building latrines, which is an important thing, but if you don't ask the local people, where do you want the latrines, and can you help us build them, and, let's teach you how to maintain them. A bunch of Americans go down, build latrines for a week, feel good about themselves, and leave, and then the local people never use them or don't know how to take care of them, and you haven't really done a lot of good in that scenario. So as I was on my quest to learn more about the right way to do this sort of thing, it timed nicely with me starting a PhD program in leadership and policy at Niagara University and being on a tenure track here at RIT and needing to have a scholarship agenda. So this is what I've kind of focused on and really taken a deep dive into. So let me share just a real superficial overview of some of the highlights from the literature about what different authors are saying on these topics. A lot of people are sort of doing interventions, taken again from the outsider's perspective without ever really trying to figure out what the underlying problem is. So they end up basically treating a symptom and not getting at the root cause of the problem. Like, I'll feed you today, but I'm going to go home in a week, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen when I leave. You know, we haven't really addressed the underlying problem there. There's, as I've mentioned, a big issue with, you know, people needing access to care. When I take groups down with me, I take them to visit hospitals down there, and some of the public hospitals are pretty scary what the conditions are. But there's a lot of, I feel like, apathy maybe for people on this side of the world who are used to living in a land of affluence, you know, maybe more focused on the American dream and, you know, getting that next fancy car and buying our vacation home or whatever. You know, it definitely creates an interesting internal dilemma when you think about, you know, as I look at my own personal resources, you know, what's the best way to be a steward of those resources? Is it to just keep making myself more comfortable, or is it maybe recognizing that, you know, once I get to some certain level of comfort, that maybe I can use my resources to help people who are far below what we would consider an acceptable standard? And there's no one right or wrong answer for how to think about that, but it's something I think it's a useful exercise to do. As we've kind of alluded to, outside groups often will take an approach that might be described as technocratic or paternalistic, where they just come in and act like they know or assume that they know what the problem is and what should be done, and they get very little input and feedback from the local people, and not really realizing that, you know, what works here might not work there, and there might be all sorts of historical reasons why things are the way they are, and unless we address the bigger picture, we're not really making much of a useful change. You'll find over and over again in the literature that creating a partnership between an outside agency, for example, like Restore Haiti, and a local group or a group of people there is really important. But as we'll discuss later, it's important that that be a very mutually respectful and kind of equal power dynamic between the two groups. There are lots of examples of the outside group comes into a country, they sort of have a partner that they work with, but they end up basically kind of running the show and telling the indigenous people what they're going to do and how to do it, and maybe the local people just basically become like their employees and not really driving the ship, you might say. And one thing that's kind of disturbing, but I found over and over again, was that many humanitarian efforts, the big benefit is to the people who went on the humanitarian trip. Maybe it's a week trip somewhere. It does great things for the person who goes. It teaches them about the world. It shifts their perspective. They feel good about maybe helping people. But there's often very little benefit for the people that they intended to help. Maybe they help them for a couple days, but then, you know, they go home and then what? You know, who's going to take care of the people in the clinic once the medical team from the U.S. leaves if there isn't a good sustainable continuity plan in place? We hear about teams going down on a medical mission and bringing little, you know, supply of medications. Maybe they see somebody and they identify hypertension, high blood pressure. They start them on some medication. They give them a little baggie of it that maybe lasts them for a week or two, maybe a month. And then they run out of the medicine, and there was no plan put in place about what to do next. You know, how do you get this medication locally? And so the person's blood pressure is only treated for, you know, a week or two every time a team comes down, and that might be very irregular. You hear about people bringing medical equipment. Maybe they bring radiology equipment, x-ray equipment, and donate it to a hospital. But there's all sorts of issues around, was there anybody actually trained in that area to use the equipment? And let's say there was an x-ray technician who knows how to use it, but all equipment requires maintenance. And what happens when the machine breaks down? You know, just because you know how to take an x-ray doesn't mean you know how to fix x-ray equipment. And so there's lots and lots of examples of equipment that's been donated from the developed world to the developing world that's just sitting there not used because nobody knows what to do with it, or it's broken and they can't fix it. We hear about people say, oh, we've got computers that are still good, we should donate them to a developing nation. And basically, they maybe send all these computers down to an area and feel good about themselves, but, oh, there's a minor issue that maybe that area is in the common scenario where they don't have power, so they can't actually plug in the computers. But, oh, if they do have power, there's a really good chance they don't have Wi-Fi or some way to connect them to some sort of network, so it might be good for word processing, but probably not the full, you know, potential use that you were thinking that computer was doing for the people in that area. Another great story I heard was regarding building supplies after the earthquake. People thought, all right, there's surplus building supplies, you know, wood and all the stuff you need to build stuff, maybe even carpet and different things. So they ship it to Haiti because they need to rebuild. And one of the things that ended up making its way down there was shag carpet, which, I don't know, I think of like the 70s when shag carpet was a big thing. So all these poor Haitian people end up having houses made with shag carpet. But there's a little problem because they don't have power. They don't have vacuum cleaners. They're used to cleaning their wood floors or cement floors or dirt floors with just a broom, but you can't really sweep shag carpet. So after a very short amount of time, the shag carpet becomes more of a problem than a help. And it's just, again, people with great intentions, but not really educating themselves. I think that all of you guys who registered for this were sent a link that had a couple of articles that you could read that expand on some of these concepts in greater detail. One of the participants, who shall remain nameless, sent me an email saying, great, I signed up for your webinar, now you're giving me homework to do, but you know, that's what us faculty people like to do, is give out some homework. So if you get time, check out the articles, and they'll give you a little bit more information on some of these topics that we'll be discussing here. In the article titled Leadership of Humanitarian Organizations Working in Less Developed Countries, a Best Practice Analysis, I kind of lay out some concepts that were brought from the literature, as well as interviews I did with leaders of different organizations that I feel are doing a good job with this sort of thing. And the objectives are further broken down into 4 goals. So we're going to briefly run through those. And you can see our objective number 1 is empower and develop the indigenous people. And basically the concept here with goal 1, striving towards sustainable independence, is that we want to work ourselves, those of us who are the visitors, out of a job. We want to do such a good job with creating sustainable independence that they don't need us at all, other than maybe as consultants, support, but they are fully functional without us there. And that we move towards getting the indigenous people very involved in leadership, and that's going to require us to mentor and empower people who have great potential to rise up and meet their potential. We don't want to focus on what they don't have, we want to focus on what they do have. And what I've learned is that, you know, my first reaction was, oh man, I need to bring all these medications down and vaccinations, and I need to bring healthcare providers and do everything from afar coming down to them. But there's plenty of doctors that are available, and nurses, there's medications available, there's vaccinations available. It's just a matter of pulling the different pieces, the assets that they already have, into play and kind of organizing the logistics of it all. And then a big part here with goal 4 is education and training needs to be emphasized. So down in the pictures you see on the bottom left is Dr. Mark Shelley, the Chief of Infectious Disease, running a program that was great. Dr. Lawrence Sugarman, a professor here at RIT, donated the microscope that you see in the picture, and Dr. Shelley spent the week training the nurses, 2 of whom are pictured there, how to do gram stains and various other diagnostic tests using that microscope. And there's a young man named Ali in the front who wants to be a doctor, so he was in on the training, and we've been investing a lot of time in him, trying to help him grow in his desire to be a healthcare provider. But we left after a week, and they were better off. They had a piece of equipment and the knowledge to do diagnostics that they didn't have before. The next picture, there's my friend Denise and I doing a nutrition seminar for parents of young children, teaching them about how to make sure their kids have well-balanced nutrition, and we really tried to focus on what was available locally to them. And then the picture on the bottom right side is from graduation of a first aid training class that actually was run by RIT physician assistant students, and we chose that the people in the class were teachers so that we were doing basically a training of the trainers kind of scenario. We taught these teachers how to teach first aid, and I saw the gentleman in that picture when I was there last month, and he said that those teachers have now taught the class we taught them several times, so it's perpetuating it. The team I brought this year, we did a hypertension training and diabetes training, vaccination informational session, women's health. The last 2 summers we've done women's health. Last summer we did suturing and casting workshops. So that's become a really big focus for us. The second big objective here is really focusing on long-term relationships and partnerships with these indigenous people. And really the only way to really understand the root causes of the problems is to be committed for the long haul, to really start to, walk the journey with them, because there's not going to be any quick fix. And as you heard me say in my first trip, getting to know people like Colson and others like that young guy Ali and the nurses that are in the pictures, they're wonderful people, and you just want to be with them and learn what it is that they're struggling with and how we can work together to find solutions. And this whole relationship has to be built on mutual respect and trust. You have to really not try and, have that top-down kind of approach. It's, we're in this together. We have to look for solutions that are appropriate within their culture, so we need lots and lots of input. We might say, this is what we think would work. Does that make sense from your perspective? And trust that they will guide us, the outsiders, as to what would work within their context. The pictures there you see is RIT grad Samantha Whalen, who's holding her sponsored child, and she's now gone 2 summers in a row to really get to know her and start to develop that long-term relationship. I'm the guy that stands out a little bit in the picture by the jet ski. These are a bunch of my Haitian friends, and they took us to the beach and let me drive a jet ski for the first time ever. So that was kind of cool to go to Haiti and drive a jet ski. And then we have RIT graduate Terry Reagan with, I think, the cutest little girl I've ever seen as we were doing some of our training workshops there this last August. Moving on to our third objective, it's, again, this idea of really working to understand the local culture. We don't want to be paternalistic. We don't want to just kind of assume we know what's going on. We have to really commit ourselves to learning about their history, their tradition, their customs, their values. I mentioned how important it is to learn what's appropriate to wear so that you're not causing distraction or being offensive in any way. One thing that I've seen is when I bring a group down there, there's a lot of times where we're constantly comparing what's the same and what's different between our culture in the U.S. and their culture there. And it's kind of easy when we get to a place where we see a difference between the way we do things and the way they do things to shift into a little bit of a, like, well, their way is inferior to ours, like, oh, isn't that cute, the sort of backwards way of doing things. And we have to be careful. I think maybe look at it as different but equal. And, maybe that old expression, when in Rome, do as the Romans, is really important to be sensitive. We don't want to come across as the ugly Americans going down there and doing inappropriate things. Going to move on to the fourth goal there is really, really requesting feedback of the indigenous people. It's so, so important. Because, again, we could do things with great, great intentions that are not very well received. I just wanted to take a little bit of time to read you an example that comes to me from a leader that does work in Uganda about some really good intentions that did not end up going really well. So this is from an interview I did with him. It's contained in one of the articles as well. So it says, there was a group locally that was getting together and sewing pillowcase dresses. Yet the idea was something as simple and cheap as a pillowcase can turn into a dress for a young girl in East Africa, and all it takes is a couple of straps, a couple of snips, a couple of stitches, and it's a dress. It sounds so magical, right? So they were getting together for these dressmaking parties, and someone had contacted me saying, hey, would you like to bring some of these to Uganda? And I was like, yeah, sure. This was early, so I was like, hey, we'll take anything. That would be great. They have all kinds of needs. So we bring about 100 of these pillowcase dresses, and they weren't all pillowcases, but they were at least simple sack dresses. And we go to one orphanage where we're doing a water project, and we bring these dresses, And of course, for the donors, I want to get some pictures. It was all girls, and I already had something inside me stop and say, we're not doing anything for the boys. It's not that we have to serve everybody, but admittedly, it's a rough point where you go, hey, on the basis of gender, even though you are all orphans, we will only do something nice for the girls. I had a voice in the back of my head say, wait, something might be wrong with this whole scenario, as I was watching the boys stand off on the side, watching what was going on. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. It says, you know, I'm actually, let's see, there's a lot, sorry, I'm skipping around. All right, so I'm thinking I might be amplifying a sense of poverty and worthlessness in these boys when they go, hey, they didn't bring me anything, and I would like to talk to my mom about it, but I don't have one because I'm an orphan. I'm like, oh my gosh, so this is going on in the back of my mind. Second of all, I'm realizing that there's something not quite right in this interaction as I'm going, hey, can you try your dress on, and then I would like to get a picture with you. Well, here's what I found out through conversations with people who love us and care about us and know that we want to grow. These were Ugandan friends. They said, you need to know those dresses are not appropriate. He said, in Uganda, we take dresses down to the ground. That's partly because we are conservative and partly because life here is very active and moving, and there's a lot of squatting and bending and climbing and things to do life. So it's too short. And they said that style of dress is really considered what they would call a dressing gown. So like if you're doing laundry, you can wear this because they really only have maybe 1 or 2 sets of clothes. So he's trying to be nice. What it came down to is they look at it as underwear. So basically I came to these young girls and said, hey, look, I brought you a bunch of underwear. Can you put it on, and I want to take pictures with you? Oh my gosh, it's a horrible feeling to realize you did that. Like, I did that. So to have to come back up and come to the people on this side who ask, so how did it go? And say, hey, boy, first of all, I just want to say thanks for getting all these people together to mobilize them and try and meet a need. This is some feedback I would love to share with you to help make this more effective. Honestly, the group was not interested in changing their design. They were not all that happy about the fact their gift wasn't appropriately received. They felt out of sorts because I'm saying in order for this to actually be good, it needs to be longer. It needs to be like this. You do understand you're not giving them something they can wear to school. You're giving them something they can wear around the house to do chores, and that's valuable, but please understand it accurately. They were all bent out of shape about it. I never worked with them again because I was like, hey, we are focused on serving and learning and growing and submitting ourselves to what we are learning. That was tough. So that's an example that I think really illustrates good intentions that were not appropriate for Uganda. I do want to say that the people who did this, I don't mean to criticize them. They were doing a good thing, and I actually have talked to the people in Haiti, and they said, yeah, those dresses would be totally fine for Haiti. So it's just a matter of matching up the culture with what you're trying to do. So we're going to close to the end here. Got a few more concepts I wanted to throw out there to you. I also sent you guys another article that really is something that if you are involved in leadership in a developing country, it's important to think about your leadership style. You know, there's a lot of what's happened in developing countries that's the aftermath of colonialism. You know, poverty beats people up, and the World Bank actually did some research where they asked people in developing countries who are clearly very poor, describe what poverty is, and they said things like humiliation, shame, depressed, low self-esteem, inferior, powerless. You know, they didn't talk about economics. They talked about kind of their self-worth and those sorts of things. So I think we really have to take a look at our leadership style and make sure we're not perpetuating those sorts of things. And I really highly encourage anybody who's involved in any form of leadership, but especially if you're going into a developing country, to check out the book, The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. And they focus on 5 practices of exemplary leadership that as I read the book, I thought this is perfect for people that are doing this kind of work. I'm going to kind of combine, for time's sake, some highlights from 1 and 2 there, model the way and inspire a shared vision. Basically, I think, you know, it goes back to developing relationships, to really understanding the local people, to figuring out together what are our goals, what's our mission, what are we aspiring to accomplish, and then those in leadership need to really model that. As different visitors come down, they need to understand the culture as they work with the local people to try and empower them. They model that way of thinking, like positive and leading by example. And if you look at number 3, challenge the process, basically things have been going poorly for a very long time in many of these people's lives. So the process that's in place clearly isn't working. So I think by partnering with the local people, looking at the assets that are there, thinking about all of the potential things, and this is where I think RIT has such a great possibility to really help in these contexts. We have our focus on innovation, we have our focus on sustainability. If RIT turned loose its brain power on some of these problems and really partnered with these people, I think we could make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives as we work together to challenge the process of what's been happening. The 4th one, enable others to act. We can't be micromanagers. We have to be focused on shifting the authority to the locals, again, working ourselves out of a job, trusting them, mentoring them, strengthening them, allowing them to step forward, and then moving on to number 5 there, encouraging the heart. There has to be really authentic speaking life into people and letting them see the strengths that you see in them that they might not even see in themselves, as maybe their self-esteem isn't so good. The picture on the bottom left is of Sam Whalen with a bunch of young girls that live in an orphanage, but Restore Haiti doesn't call it an orphanage. They call it the Restore House, because they say orphan is a term that talks about what you don't have. An orphanage is where you live if you don't have parents and all of this loss. But here we have the Restore House, where they're restoring these people to a place of dignity and self-worth, and Sam did a great job just loving these kids, and they're loving her right back. The middle picture, there's a young lady named Summer just encouraging this young boy who was having a bad day and really loving him. And then there's me with my bubble girls from the orphanage or the Restore House, just having a blast. When I hang out with these kids, I can't help but think, where the heck does racism come from? Because there's no sign of racism when you're hanging around with little children like this. On this last trip, there was a young lady named Wendell who is amazing, and she's very good at English, and we were going to be doing our women's health program, and we needed a female to translate that. We didn't think the men would be comfortable with some of the translation that would be going on when talking about women's health issues. So Wendell was a bit nervous about doing this, but I just gently held her face and looked her right in the eye and said, Wendell, you are a smart lady, you are so good at language skills, you need to be confident, I know you can do this. And she went up there despite her anxiety and did an amazing job and did a great job. And we wanted our nurse, our Haitian nurse, to go up and talk to the people, and she was nervous about doing it, but she got up there and did a great job. And after she helped us with some of the educational programs we had initiated, she said, you know what, I think we can continue to do these educational programs even after your team goes away, just with our Haitian staff. And that was exactly what we wanted to have happen. So kind of in conclusion, the big themes here are focusing on empowering the local people, the long-term relationships. This is not going to be a quick fix. It's got to be an investment of willing to be in it for the long haul. Really respecting the local culture, not just coming in like cocky Americans and telling them what to do, and really investing that, there's great assets there. Once we work together, the best of our culture and the best of their culture, we can move towards a better future. It's challenging, it's not easy, but these are great people, they're worth it. This is a picture of that day when Colson asked me to be his dad as we're walking through the village. I didn't realize someone, I think my friend Bonnie had taken this picture of us walking together as he's asking me to be his dad. So we're going to kind of wrap up there, and I know we're cutting it close on time here. Any questions from the participants? I don't know if this resonated with people. I do thank you for taking time out of your busy day. I've put my contact information if you want to continue the dialogue via phone or email if we run out of time today. If you're interested in doing more reading on the topics, there's some references there for you that you can check out. But I'll turn it over to Cindy to see if we've got a few minutes here for any questions that might have come in. Or
I don't see anything yet, John. Thank you. That was quite inspirational. I will just ask a question specific to the students and alumni that you have taken to Haiti. How have their perceptions changed before they went than when they came back? Did they have that same perspective? Was their perspective different, and how?
Yeah, I think that virtually everybody who goes down there, even if you try and prepare in advance, you think you know what you're going to get into, and I think, again, most people think like they're going to find these poor, sad people, and we're going to make such a big difference in their life, and every single person I've ever brought back or other people I've traveled with, it's always, we got so much more out of it. We realized that we could learn from them. The RIT students that have gone, that were involved in that first aid training said, my gosh, the people that took the class from us, they asked so many questions, they were so engaged, and it made them feel bad that they sometimes are more passive when they're sitting in their classes here at RIT, and they kind of vowed to be more interactive and take their education more seriously after that. I think most of them come away, like I do, feeling like going to Jacmel, Haiti is like going to the happiest place on earth, you know, which I think is a label generally reserved for Disney World, but I think that Jacmel is much happier than my experiences in Disney World, and it's because they've got this whole group of people that are very focused on education and learning. We say that we have a future president that is being brought up amongst those group of kids that are going to school. They're developing critical thinking skills. They're learning about elections. They're learning about how to spot corrupt politicians and how to get them out of office and all of that. So I think all of the RIT alumni that have gone have come back transformed and, you know, inspired to be like their Haitian people and to maybe realign their priorities a little bit.
So very quickly, John, if someone wanted to get involved, would they visit the Restore Haiti website? Would they contact you? If someone was so inspired today to jump in and dig in, what do they got to do?
Well, I think both are options. I usually try and take a team down there once a year at least. I've sometimes been able to go twice. And my focus tends to be a bit more on the medical side of things, but they have all sorts of opportunities for people. If you are a teacher or, you know, computer expert, for example, we had Intel was able to give us a grant to create a computer lab. So occasionally the lab needs maintenance or, you know, work done on it. If people are in the construction trade, that's an opportunity. I feel, again, with RIT's focus on sustainable and renewable energy sources, there's all kinds of opportunity there. Designing earthquake-proof structures and agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and all of these different things are possible. So feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call or go right to the Restore Haiti website. Again, I think we're going to continue to look for ways to get RIT people more involved in having experiences either directly through an RIT-approved program or just connecting you to the opportunities through Restore Haiti as a separate thing from an RIT project.
All right. Well, our hour is done. John, I thank you for your time today, and I thank all of you out there who joined us.